What's up? What's happening from Green Turtle in Navy Yard? Craig Hoffman here for the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, where you see the Rooster has not moved. He's still sitting there. Chris Russell is.
My butt's very sore, in case you need to know.
I very much didn't. That is the weirdest open to the show we've ever had. But thank you so much for doing that in public here, where there are people. Not many people, if we're being honest, because, of course, it was slammed 30 minutes ago, and everyone has made their way over. But if you want to leave the game early, depending on what happens, or just your own personal feelings, or whatever else brings you to the Green Turtle, you want to get an early seat for the games tonight. Of course, the Women's Elite Eight, which you can listen to here on the Team 980. They'll have them on the big screens here as well after the Nats game. We're going to talk to Christy Winters-Scott at the bottom of the hour about those games, which is really fun because I was texting with Christy to set up that interview, Chris, and then I looked up on the Big Ten Network on that television right there, and there she was. Apparently she was in a commercial break. So that's really fun that all came together for us quickly.
Nice.
So we are live here at the Green Turtle. They have a great special going all day here. The Draft Pass, which you can get $20 or spend $20, get a select appetizer, and then unlimited 5-cent draft beers. So that is one heck of a deal. I'm looking at the beers they have on draft over there. There's quite a selection. You could try them all for a nickel and still not spend $1 if you tried all the varieties. I don't know that you'd survive.
Well, you got to spend $20 first.
Well, I'm saying, but on
you get
the beer
an appetizer,
portion,
you're right.
Yeah, on the beer portion, it would not be. You would not have to spend $21 before tax to try all of those beers. Again, I'm not saying that's a good idea, but you could.
Like if you can do it reasonable and responsibly and get an Uber.
If you're not driving and your alcohol tolerance is that of an NFL offensive lineman, then by all means give it a shot.
Or Matt Essig.
Or, Essig's over here now. I don't know. This could be a fun every segment you try a new beer. But I don't feel like getting any of us fired today. The point is, Chris Russell, I think you like Michael Penix too much. We call that a transition in the business.
Hi.
If you were listening to Russell's show, as many of you were streaming on into us here, can you kind of recap where you're at with Penix? Because you got, I guess, a text from someone in the league that informed some of your opinions on some of these quarterbacks?
Well, not on Penix, on McCarthy. Mm-hmm. So Friday morning, got a text from a current NFL assistant coach who knows Dan Quinn very well. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
He had a strong hunch, feeling, whatever, that they're going McCarthy at 2.
Okay.
Now, that being said, I know they certainly have interest in McCarthy. I understand some of the reasons why they have interest in McCarthy. I would not personally do that, but I'm not Adam Peters. But like a lot of people, and I talked to somebody yesterday, a lot of people feel because JJ McCarthy kind of reminds people of somebody that would be a great fit in the Shanahan system, that could be what they're looking for ideally, a better version of Brock Purdy, and somebody to kind of fit in that offense. And remember, Adam Peters obviously comes from San Francisco.
Yeah.
I know Cliff is Cliff, but
we can get to McCarthy in a second, because I like McCarthy more than anyone else.
So here's the deal. I said,
but what's your deal with Penix?
Right. If you trade out of number 2, which is still a possibility, I wouldn't call it a likely possibility, but it's still a possibility. If you trade out of number 2 and you drop somewhere into the 15, 17, 18, somewhere in that range, I like Michael Penix over Bo Nix, who would presumably be the 2 quarterbacks you would consider in that spot. And I think Penix is the best pure passer in this particular class.
Okay, so that's the quote that got me.
Yeah.
You said that on your show, right? And as you said it, I literally, in the graphic that's currently on YouTube, wrote down, Russell stated Penix, quote, best pure passer in the draft.
Yes.
That's how television works.
Right.
They get the quote and they put it right there in whatever context.
I like it.
What do you mean?
You are a media mogul. That's what you are. I am not.
What do you mean, though, by best pure passer? Because this is where I think people throw around terms that wind up, if you actually start to poke holes, being pretty leaky.
All right, so here was my argument. I thought, first of all, Caleb Williams, I think, is a side-to-side horizontal play extender, playmaker, good thrower, no doubt, very accurate, all that. But I don't know if I would just say pure passer. And when I say pure passer, I'm thinking going way back here, like a Dan Marino type. I know Dan Marino, one of the best passers of all time.
Sure.
I'm just saying a guy that did not use mobility, a guy who did not have much mobility, but had deadly accuracy, could rifle, all sorts of things.
So would you call Patrick Mahomes a pure passer?
I would not in my definition because he's so athletic and so able to extend plays, break things down, throw from different angles, and so on.
So this is kind of my thing with this. And like Caleb to Penix is a bit of a good one here to try to make this point. I think when people say pure passer, what they mean is he doesn't run. What they actually ignore is who is actually the better passer from the pocket. Because I would tell you that from the pocket, if you said, hey, you can't leave the pocket, I would trust Caleb Williams over Michael Penix, and it's not particularly close.
Why would you? All right, so help me out because, again, you've watched more tape than I have. Why would you say that?
Because Caleb Williams did not often get the chance to be a quote-unquote pure passer because his offensive line was, and I cannot stress this enough, terrible. Like, the more you watch Williams, the more you realize that some of the playmaker hero stuff, occasionally does he pass up singles and doubles to try search for home runs? Sure. His defense was also god-awful, so he probably felt like he had to hit a lot of home runs. But he also did not have the opportunity to just sit back in the pocket and dice up defenses. Penix did. Penix has probably 4 NFL offensive linemen. He's got 2 that are going to be top 60 picks this year. Both tackles, both guards are probably Rosengarten, and then obviously Fontenot is going to be maybe even a top 15 pick, probably a top 15 pick at this point, depending on what those teams in that range like in terms of their flavor of offensive tackles. Meanwhile, and by the way, he's got 3 top 70 wide receivers that he's throwing to. Caleb, and so those guys are winning, getting open, all that kind of stuff. And they're playing in the same conference. The defense is not exactly great in that Pac-12 conference. May it rest in peace. Meanwhile, Caleb, on the rare occasion that he could just sit back and do it, did it at an extremely high level. Now, is what makes him a generational prospect the other stuff? Yes. But this goes back to the ceiling floor conversation, where a guy like Mahomes is him because he can do the extra stuff. But if you just let him sit back there and beat you from the pocket, he is better than anyone else in the league at that. And so I think when you look at Penix, what you have is a guy who, despite running a 4.46 at his pro day, never actually uses any athleticism. He does not run. His decision-making from the pocket is questionable in terms of he throws the ball away too much. He's inaccurate. He's inconsistent. And so what actually happens.
Penix, you're saying.
Yes. So I think what actually happens with the idea that, like, Penix is this pure passer. He can spin it. Like, he's got a great arm, without question, and his ability to layer the ball. Like, there's a lot of stuff to like about Michael Penix. I'm not saying he's a bad prospect. But what we're actually saying is we're finding a way to use a compliment to describe how he's limited and what makes him not as good as other players.
So, I mean, I understand a lot of what you just said. I guess, you're right. I never said, well, in my mind, Caleb Williams, in terms of if he was just kind of a pure pocket passer, wouldn't be better than Michael Penix. I guess where I'm at with Penix, I think clearly he's not the mobile athlete that Drake May, Jaden Daniels, or Caleb Williams are, clearly.
Yeah.
But I think from what I've seen, anticipation, accuracy, ball location, timing, rhythm. Now, again, a lot of that, Rome Odunze is awesome. Yeah. That offense, great.
So is Jalen McMillan, and so is Jalen Polk.
Right, I got it. But like if we're going to say, and I said this on the show, I said if we're going to punish Penix for that, then don't we have to also say, Jaden had a similar
so that gets to the level of competition,
which is different than USC. USC had weapons, but they didn't have those guys.
Right, but like Jaden is doing that with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and NFL linemen in the SEC against like really good defenses week in and week out, and he did it better.
Let me ask you this. Is the SEC defensively as good as it used to be? I don't think it is.
It's still better than everywhere else.
Sure, absolutely.
And, by the way, one of his better games is against Alabama, who is as NFL of a Alabama's defense has been described to me as more NFL than some NFL defenses.
Sure.
And I will say, well, yes, it is very hard to, like, on a couple weeks' notice, go against an NFL defense. When Michael Penix played Michigan, he had no idea what he was doing.
No, you're right.
And that was, by the way, after everyone fell in love with him that had just started watching college football for the first time in the semifinal, which was funny to watch.
And I worry about that, too, because Michigan is an aggressive downhill blitz, come at you from different angles type of, and you're right. I guess where I'm at is, all right, maybe I stretch a little bit when I say best pure passer. Again, depends on your definition.
Sure.
Maybe I'm slightly off on that. I'll yield to you, and you know your stuff. I guess where I'm at is I think he's the best value in the draft. And I also say if I'm going to draft a quarterback, not the top three guys, Caleb, obviously, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and a lot of people, again, are building towards JJ McCarthy. If you're not going to pick one of those guys and you're going to trade down and wind up, 15 or wherever, even if you wind up with 11 and 23, if Minnesota jumps up and gives you, the package you want, 11 might be too early for Penix.
Way too early
in my opinion. But there's nothing to say that you can't then trade down again and still wind up with Penix in the late teens or the early 20s. And that's where I go, okay, from a dissect a defense standpoint, if you give him time, and that isn't a big if you give him the ability to see, I think he can carve you up. Now, is he the same type of player as Jaden Daniels? No. But that's why Jaden Daniels is going to go top 2 or 3, and Michael Penix is going to go, if he's lucky, in the 15 to 30.
Well, sure. And I think Daniels is actually misunderstood quite a bit as well because he's so explosive as a runner, but he's not actually, he is both the ultimate and not a running quarterback at the same time. Like, when you think about guys that get out and extend plays, that's not Jaden Daniels. He does not run to throw. He runs to run. He's so good at it that I don't care. And I would be more than happy if the Commanders drafted him at 2. But I think that is kind of the common misconception where, the same thing is kind of happening now with Penix, of the group people that like him. They go, oh, he's a better athlete than you think. He's a 4.46 guy. And I'm like, okay, cool. But he never runs, so who cares?
Do you think he works his way around the pocket better than maybe we're giving him credit for?
Not really. Okay. He also doesn't have to that often in college because his offensive line is
maybe he will have to, in the NFL.
You're always going to have to.
Here's one thing, and it does jump out. Like you said, he does throw the ball away. It does keep him. Look, I think that's a smart thing. I mean, I know you can't do that every play in the NFL because eventually you got to stand in there and make a play. I got it. But to me, I want quarterbacks that know I can't take this sack. I did a study before I even met you back in 20. I guess it was 14.
We've known each other a long time at this point.
Okay, Chris. I guess it was 2014. I said, Robert Griffin's biggest problem is he cannot get rid of the football. He cannot process. He takes too many sacks, and sacks are as bad as turnovers in some ways, and people just killed me for that. And I'm not saying...
Probably because that, in some ways, is doing a lot of work there.
Okay, but sacks are really, really, really bad. They are
super
drive
harmful.
Killers, right?
Yeah.
And most offenses can't overcome a 6, 7, 8-yard loss, whatever. Certainly no offense that we've seen here in Washington. So what I would say is I'd rather a quarterback, while he's still learning and trying to figure out everything on the NFL level, get rid of the football as opposed to taking a sack or getting lit up like a Christmas tree. So I don't look at that as a negative. And if you look, this big pressure to sack percentage thing is all high teens for Daniels, for Caleb,
Penix,
7.6%.
Yeah, Penix's number is awesome. The process to get there is not very good. And I think that's why you have to watch the tape. And that becomes very difficult. And I brought it up with Daniels, and people have rightly pushed back and been like, you know what? He runs into some sacks because he's trying to make plays, but it's the right decision. It's the right process.
That's fair.
So I think
it's a pretty wide gap, though, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but it also, again, if you just throw the ball away at the first sign of pressure all the time,
that's fair.
You can't really win with that either.
That's fair.
But I want to double-click on McCarthy here. We're going to take a quick break, come back. Again, Christy Winters-Scott previewing the Elite Eight action tonight with us coming up at 4:30. But real quick next, I hear Chris talk about JJ McCarthy in the way that a lot of people talk about JJ McCarthy, and as someone who has wound up being put in the position of JJ McCarthy defender, I'm just going to lean into that next. I'm just going to all out say, you want to know what? Y'all want to come after JJ McCarthy? I'm going to let you come after, but I'm going to defend the guy.
I ain't coming after him.
JJ McCarthy talk before we get to talking about Iowa-LSU tonight next on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We are live on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Chris Russell with us for one more segment here, talking quarterbacks. Of course, the NFL draft is less than 1 month away at this point, and we are going to talk about, of course, the Elite Eight action tonight coming up in just a few minutes with Christy Winters-Scott. But, Chris, I heard you talking about JJ McCarthy. You don't seem like you have a lot of hope for JJ McCarthy being a good NFL quarterback. All right, let me not put words in your mouth. What do you like? What's the 30-second JJ McCarthy position for you?
Solid to good.
Okay.
I think Kirk Cousins maybe with mobility.
Okay, so you actually hit on the exact thing that I would like to know from people who don't like JJ McCarthy, which I'm not saying you do. Mm-hmm. But if I tell you JJ McCarthy is Kirk Cousins with better mobility, isn't that a top 10 quarterback in the NFL? And what the hell are we searching for if you don't want that guy?
Arguably, yes. I mean, but some people would crap all over Kirk Cousins and say he's not a top 10 quarterback because he doesn't win big games, because he doesn't win playoff games, because he doesn't have mobility, because of this turnover. You and I know that Kirk Cousins is, I mean, if he's not top 10, he's right outside the top 10.
He's been between 10 and 15 for a decade.
Right. But I would always say, like, the way I would describe Kirk is good to very good, but not great or elite. That's what I would say. Good to very good, more closer to very good than good. I don't know if JJ McCarthy is going to be very good. I think he's got a chance. I think he checks, and again, you would know better than me, and I don't know what Logan thinks. He checks a lot of boxes for me. Leader, athleticism, tough character, well coached, smart, reads his progressions. I think it throws with anticipation. Now, the one coach that I mentioned that said, hey, watch out, a lot. Not that, again, that's going out on a limb, said he is concerned about JJ McCarthy's arm strength. Ultimately, his arm, and that's where I started thinking more Kirk Cousins, because that was a knock against Kirk Cousins, right?
So here's the thing about JJ McCarthy and arm strength. And I'm not saying you just did this, right? If you don't think that J.J. McCarthy has a strong arm, all you're telling me is you've never watched J.J. McCarthy. Like, this is the thing that drives me absolutely bananas this time of year. People get caught up in archetypes, comparisons, everything other than actually looking at what is true. J.J. McCarthy threw the ball as hard at the NFL Combine as everyone, including Joe Milton, who launched the ball 90 yards at his pro day. So if you then watch J.J. McCarthy on film, this dude will roll out to it. There's a play against, I think it's UNLV, it might be Utah. I keep getting it mixed up because they both wear red, and I watched a lot of tape that day. But he literally rolls out to his left and throws a 30-yard rope, like frozen rope across his body, bang, on the numbers in the back of the end zone. This dude has arm strength, like all the arm strength you need. I would say that J.J. McCarthy is a B+ at basically everything. Okay. He's got a B+ arm. He's got B+ accuracy. He's got B+ mobility. He's like a B+ is like not just mobility around to make plays with his arm. He's a B+ runner. Like he ran a 4.5 and has run away from people. And he's an A+ from everything I've heard mentally. I just don't get how that guy, for all the evidence we have of what works for an NFL quarterback, makes people like vomit at the idea of taking him in the top 5. Just tell me you haven't watched him and let's skip it. And I'm not saying, again, that you've done that, but that is me now venting my frustration, unfortunately for you, at you, as we sit here at the Green Turtle.
But I was surprised to hear the coach say this. Now, I don't know how much tape he's watched. I have no idea. I mean, he is an offensive coach, okay, but he works for a team that's not looking for a quarterback.
Sure.
Let's put it that way. Okay, and he does not coach quarterbacks. So I would say you can have a concern that he doesn't have rocket elite arm strength, but say, a little bit of a question there, and kind of conveniently ignore that he's got more than good arm strength. So it just kind of depends on how, A, you deliver the message to whoever you're talking to, and B, however the message is processed from whoever then disseminates, that analysis.
And then I think it just comes down to...
on tape, I saw the same. I saw the same thing that you did in terms of, like, I think J.J. McCarthy, it surprised me. I thought J.J. McCarthy was more accurate.
Because everyone thought thinks he's like a game manager. And it's like, yeah, but what if a game manager also had physical talents? Like, The stuff that allows a game manager, which is a term we use for people that don't have the physical traits ability. The thing that allows those guys to win consistently in the NFL is good decision-making, good accuracy, good timing, good understanding. What if I told you JJ McCarthy has all of those things and plus physical traits? Like, I just don't understand why that's such a turnoff for some people. I don't think you're the guy to help me because you're right there with me. But
I just think it's because people overreact to them running the ball 32 times in state college.
And then people are like, well, okay, well, if they would have trusted him more. Oh, yeah, you got a better game plan than Jim Harbaugh. They won the Natty. What more was he supposed to do? Yeah. Anyway, thank you for sticking around.
Thank you for
allowing me to yell for the last 10 minutes.
Sorry if I aggravated you talking about Michael Penix.
It was good. I was like, you know what? I want to dice this up because this is what happens.
Coach Russell is not watching the same tape as Coach Hoffman. I'll tell you that much.
It's just as available, man.
I know. It's just I got to find more time.
Yeah, you're telling me. All right, when we get back, Christy Winters-Scott talking about Iowa-LSU. And, oh, by the way, the other game tonight's amazing as well. We're talking hoops with Christy Winters-Scott next. It's the Hoffman Show. We are live on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. We're live from the Green Turtle today, where you can watch the Nats, who are not having a great top of the first inning here. Top of the second inning. I guess the first went by that quickly. Dang. But they're down 2-0. Two-run for the Pirates. Mackenzie Gore in a bit of a bind here. Not ideal, but you can come over if that game gets on out of hand and get your spot early for the Elite Eight action tonight. In Albany is where it starts with Iowa and LSU to talk about that, as well as the USC-UConn game that will follow. It's our pleasure to be joined by our friend Christy Winters-Scott. Of course, you saw her calling some of the action for ESPN early on in the tournament. I looked up, Christy, not that long ago, and there you were on the Big Ten Network talking about tonight's game. You're everywhere.
Yeah, on the move. Thank you for having me to chop it up about these great games tonight, which I cannot wait for.
I cannot wait for these as well. And I want to talk mostly just on the court basketball, Christy, but I want to start with this idea and have you put your coaching hat on for a second of the noise, because obviously everything that's gone on with LSU, Caitlin's now getting these questions in Iowa about the big three offer. You have obviously the storylines going in of the rematch. But when the ball goes up in the air tonight and it's tipped and the clock starts, how much of that stuff, whether it's, how it affected their preparation, feeling the pressure of the moment, how much of that, if any, affects the basketball?
I mean, they're human, and I think it has to, on some level, impact the psyche, but there is a compartment. And we've seen, these players and these coaches at this juncture of the season, they know how to compartmentalize, trust and believe it. But to be asked a question kind of just opens up that window of thought again. But I know that they're able to tuck it away. But, I think they're used to questions, right? They made it to the Final Four, both of these teams. We're talking about LSU and Iowa. Both of these teams made it to the Final Four last year. So tons of questions coming their way. And I think they're more than competitively mature enough to handle it. They will come, but like everything in life, the emotions, it comes in waves at you. So you just have to understand when it does happen, where to put it. And when it comes time for that jump ball, you're in that spot. You're present where your 10 toes are, and you're mentally ready to compete. And you work so hard for that moment. So I don't think at that moment that they're going to be thinking about the questions that were asked of them in the pressers. I think they're going to be thinking, what are we doing on this next play? Let's make sure we get this first possession. And if we do, what are we doing on defense? What are we doing on offense? And I think that's the focal point for everyone.
For me tonight in this first game between Iowa and LSU, I think the referees could have a huge impact, which is not my favorite place to start any kind of breakdown. But we obviously saw the impact they had on the final last year with that technical and some questionable calls both ways. But the extra foul that was on Caitlin that adjusted her minutes. But also I think of how they struggled, Iowa did with West Virginia and the physicality. We know LSU wants to play physical. And if Iowa can kind of move and be free and they're pushing 100 points, it feels like that would be their kind of game. And so whether it's the refereeing or anywhere else you want to take it, how does the level of physicality affect tonight's game, and which side, do you think can dictate in that department?
If you watch SEC basketball, if you watch Big Ten basketball, physical, right? You have to be ready and be ready to get touched up. That's just what it is. With regards to fouls, you just have to stay disciplined. And I think that's easier said than done because you want to win so badly. So you're going full throttle, and I get it. Trust me. Then at the same time, you're looking at what happened last year when these two teams met in the championship game, right? They were the last two teams standing out of over 300 teams. So they were battle tested all year physically and mentally. But when it came down to it, didn't Angel Reese get into some foul trouble? And I think that happened in the first half. And then, yes, the fouls on Caitlin late. But I just think when it comes down to it, you have to control what you can. And that's your energy, your effort, and your focus. And I always said that as a coach. Sometimes it's out of your hands. Sometimes, you may not have fouled, but it was whistled a foul, so you have 3 fouls now, and you got to come out. So they don't ever reverse fouls. I don't think I've ever seen that happen. I've seen reversals on possession after they reviewed it, but I haven't seen many reversals on fouls being called. So you can't control that, but what you can control is your discipline. And I think both teams really need that. I know LSU, with regards to their depth, I think Iowa may have a bit more depth in that regard. But in terms of physical play, the way LSU attacks UCLA in the paint, I think that is going to be a huge point of emphasis for Iowa defensively. They've got to take that paint away from LSU, and I'm not just talking about Angel Reese, because Flau'jae Johnson was a beast against UCLA in terms of getting a piece of the paint, and she was able to finish nicely several times. And I think she made up her own move. So a couple times, I think I saw it 3 or 4 times where she just brought the ball up high and dipped behind the defense and scored. I'm like, what was that? But it was beautiful. But her attack mode mentality is going to be something that really deserves a lot of resistance from Iowa's defense, not just primary defenders, but everybody else after that. Secondary, third line, everybody's got to be on point and rotating at the proper time to contest her at the rim, because she just went silly in terms of her ability to finish inside with or without contact. So I think for Iowa, Caitlin Clark, she understands the assignment, and so does Angel Reese for that matter. I think they both understand how invaluably important they are to their teams to be on the floor. So with that in mind, you have to be aggressive, but you have to be, like I said, disciplined. But I think it's going to be the first 5 minutes of this game to see exactly how much discipline they need, because sometimes, you know, the little foul, they're not going to call every little thing, and I get that too. And I've never been an official, but God bless them.
It's a terrible job, Christy. It's the worst job.
Yeah, the interpretation is tough.
It's so tough, and then you just get screamed at. Nobody's ever happy. You have to wear a silly outfit. There's so much that that goes into it. Christy Winters-Scott, of course, basketball analyst for ESPN, the Big Ten Network. Of course, we see her locally covering the Wizards as well, but have her women's hoops hat on as we preview tonight's games, which you can hear right here on the Team 980, courtesy of Westwood One. Last year, Iowa had Monica Cimino, of course, who was playing there. Boy, she's, I think, a fifth-year senior center who's just a stalwart of their program. This year, they're big at the center of it all is Hannah Stolke. How does that switch in personnel match up specifically against Angel and the rest of LSU's bigs inside? Is that a better matchup for Iowa that can help them this year?
Yeah, for sure. I think when you're looking at Hannah Stolke, I mean, she's still a young player, a sophomore, and I think when you have someone who has gained so much experience deep into postseason last year and again this year, getting back to the Final Four, definitely something she wants to accomplish. But I think when you're looking at what Monica Cimino did, is she was 65% shooter on the inside, and I think that's what Monica is. If not, it may be a couple of percentage different. But I think efficiency-wise, I think you're looking at the same kind of threat inside. I mean, this is a kid who went for 47 or 49, something like that. I had that game. I can't remember. It was a blur, but she was ridiculous. I think she only missed 1 or 2 shots. So, I mean, she can catch fire, and that's what they're going to need from her. But what she does extremely well, she runs the floor. And when she's running the floor, Caitlin Clark finds her with the most decadent dimes in transition. So when you have someone like Hannah Stolke, who is a gazelle in the open floor, I mean, she's a track star. She ran track in high school, so she has these long strides. She pushes up the floor, and that's why the pace of play, I think, is also going to come in to be an impact statistically. I think when you're looking at what Iowa is able to do offensively, they score over 90 points a game. And LSU is third in the country with 89 points a game. So this is a high-powered, high-octane battle between two great squads. But I think the difference, I don't know if there's necessarily a difference other than Hannah Stolke's ability to sprint the floor. And not that Monica Cimino didn't do that, but I just think that Hannah Stolke finds maybe 6 or 8 points in transition because of the way and style and speed that she can get up and down the court. So I think that's going to put a lot of pressure on LSU's defense, but it's all precipitated upon how well they stop the ball. And now it could be steals, it could be live ball situations, but it's got to be glass work. They cannot let LSU get loose on the offensive boards, and then they can get their run outs because they're very successful in pushing tempo. Iowa is such a great team offensively in terms of sharing the basketball as well. So it might not be that initial pass, but maybe the hockey assist, like the extra. They're so good at the one more. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see that. But Sydney Falter is also a player who has been inserted into the starting lineup in the absence of Molly Davis, who went out with that knee injury. She's a guard, but they said maybe Molly could come back for postseason. We have not seen her yet, but Sydney Falter, the 6th Woman of the Year in the Big Ten, has really come in and been incredible the last 5 or 6 games, shooting almost 60% from the floor. So Monica Sonano, yes, we missed her presence inside, obviously, in the Big Ten. But I think when you're looking at a Falter and we're looking at Stokey, I think if you combine the two of them statistically, I think you get what Monica Sonano brought to the floor. But both of them still young, and that's the thing. I mean, Sonano had so much experience as a fifth-year player last year, and maybe that's a difference as well. But if you're talking strictly tactical ability and statistical numbers, I think if you go ahead and add Sydney Falter to Hannah Stokey, I think you get what Monica Sonano offered.
And I think that Kate Martin's rebounding has been so good for them this year. That's going to be a huge key for them tonight. On the other side, last question on this game before we switch to the USC-UConn game, which somehow is not getting as much. I mean, I don't want to say somehow. We know why. It's the rematch. It's everything. But, God, that is another good one tonight that we'll get to in a moment. But I'm also curious on the LSU side, the biggest addition for them is Haley Van Lith. Obviously comes over from Louisville last year. She matched up with Clark in the tournament last year. And the thought was like, oh, wow, she's one of the best guards in the country. Like, this is going to be a seamless transition. Somehow the strong get stronger. LSU, the defending champion. And it's been a bit of an up-and-down year. How do they get her going tonight, and what kind of role can she play if LSU wants to knock off Iowa again?
She's got to be a great passer. I think Anissa Morrow is the X factor in this game, and she doesn't get talked about at all for LSU. The transfer out of DePaul, who was a double-double machine, 22
awesome.
and 13 she averaged at DePaul, but she is a monster. And she is an X factor because she takes a lot of pressure off of Angel Reese. So we talked about Angel Reese, as we should, but Anissa Morrow is a player that needs to be considered in the conversation as well, because she is a viable threat for LSU, and not just on the glass, but her ability to score and defend. I think it goes understated, and she's been flying under the radar all season. And yes, Haley Van Lith, that was a big surprise. And both of those players, Morrow and Van Lith, were the top players on their respective teams, DePaul and Louisville, but decided to take their talents to LSU. And I think Morrow has had a seamless transition. Van Lith, not as much. And when I say that, it's not a shady comment. It's just truth. And if you look at the stats, her numbers are not the same as they were at Louisville, as I don't know if anyone expected them to be. But when you have so many scores and different kinds of offense, it's really, I'm sure, frustrating for her, because I remember there was this clip earlier in the season where she's wide open, shot ready, and threw her hands down when someone else took the shot and missed it. So I know there's some frustration on her part, or maybe earlier in the season there was. I don't know if it is now, but this is just my take from watching. Obviously, I'm not in the locker room. I've not spoken with Haley Van Lith, but just watching, it just looks like, someone who's used to probably taking, 15, 18, 20 shots a game is probably shooting more than half less than that, and feels open and wants to be an offensive threat, but just really has not found her cadence in that kind of role for LSU. And that's not a penalty for her. I mean, she chose to go there with that understanding that, I'm not going to be, the A1 player here. And although she has tried, and maybe a couple times she's had a couple good games, but I just think, she's not the Louisville Haley Van Lith, and it's no fault of her own. I mean, that's a tough transition to make for anyone, to go into a program like that, defending national champions, and, bring all, USA basketball skills. I mean, she has a vicious, maniacal, and I say that in a positive way, Kobe-esque mentality to the game. And that's tough. Well, you can't bottle that up. I mean, she's a toughie. She wants to win. I was on their games when they went to the Final Four a couple of seasons ago. So I understand. I've seen her in the gym an hour before everyone else and staying an hour after. So this is a kid who lives and breathes the game. I mean, Kobe came to watch her play before he passed away. I mean, this is a kid who understands what the game is and what it could be for her. So it's just been a tough transition for her. But I think for her, she's got to strap on defense. She's got to play tough, whoever her match is. But on the offensive end, she has to stay aggressive. And I think, try to attack that paint and try to get that extra kick-out pass if Iowa's clamping down on the inside with double teams.
Yeah, I think she could also be a huge factor tonight if Iowa zones up. Obviously, shooting helps a lot on the zone busting, so she becomes key there. But as you said, Morrow, too, is a player who can create from the high post area. Her and Angel both kind of that high-low game. Could be an interesting strategy as well. We'll see that game at 7 o'clock, or you can hear it, of course, right here on the Team 980. Then following that, you have the UConn-USC game. The headliners here, Paige Bueckers, Juju Watkins. How much of it comes down to that matchup versus the other however many players wind up checking in tonight?
Well, I love that. And, I was just up at UConn last week for several days, so I got to really feel the pulse of their team. I covered them earlier in the year as well at Minnesota and at home against Maryland. And so, I've had my eyes on them all season. And this is a team that is missing 6 kids for the year with injuries.
It's crazy.
Which at the beginning of the year, I was like, man, how are they going to manage? And now look at them. I mean, they have figured out a way to go 7 deep, maybe 7.5 deep. But discipline is the word that keeps coming to mind. And when I say that, it's not just about being disciplined on the defensive end. It's about being disciplined on the offensive end as well, because they're taking great shots. They don't take bad shots. They always take great shots. So everyone's in rebounding position. You have Aaliyah Edwards down inside who was available for the glass. But I just think that the synergy between Aaliyah Edwards and Paige Bueckers, I think, has really been special. And that's something that I asked, about last week. And I asked him, I was like, what is it about those two that brings out the best in each of them in their own way? And he said, experience is one thing, but at the same time, when Aaliyah Edwards went out with that broken nose in the Big East tournament, I think she got hurt on the 9th of March or something like that, missed a couple of games in the Big East tournament, didn't play in the championship game there. But obviously they were still able to win. But at the same time, he said that Paige really had to do a lot in her absence. So for her to come back, it's almost like, your friend may have been sick at school or something like that when you're in kindergarten, and now they're back, and now you're skipping through the playground together. It's just they're very used to one another. They understand the sweet spots. They understand how to set each other up. A lot of times Edwards was hitting Paige Bueckers on the inside. It was almost like an inverted high-low, but they just had such a great read with one another. But I just think it's going to be interesting to see what USC does. And it's not going to be, as much as we want it to be a Juju Watkins and Paige Bueckers show, although we probably will see some really incredible plays by each of them, I don't think it's going to come down to those two. Which one does better leads to the team winning. I don't think that's going to be the bottom line. I think for both teams, I think it's going to be pace of play, number one, but I also think it's going to be discipline for UConn. Obviously, with the short bench, they've got to be disciplined defensively, but I think they just have to stay with what has gotten them here, which has been discipline on the offensive end. They are a well-oiled machine when it comes to spacing, setting great screens, communication. Paige Bueckers is masterful at that, and we don't talk about that. And we don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about that enough with Paige Bueckers in terms of her leadership skills, right? We just talk about how well she sets everyone up, how well she can score the ball, but watch her in terms of what she's saying to her teammates. And they have some young kids. KK Arnold is amazing, hit that dagger of a shot against Syracuse. You just have some young kids, Ashlyn Shade, who's out there just really coming into her own as well, career highs in game 1 of the tournament. So I just think that it's going to be really interesting to see what USC tries to take away from UConn on the defensive end. And I think that is going to be the intrigue for me and what I'm looking for.
Last thing for you, Christy Winters-Scott with us here on the Hoffman Show. Can you remember a freshman in college basketball, period, or who was the last person that comes to mind that is as composed as Juju? You got her teammates in the post-game presser talking about, like, I had to summon my inner Juju at the free throw line. She's a freshman. What are we doing here? She's unbelievable, not just in her physical abilities, but her mental composure. Can you remember, men's or women's, a freshman that had this much confidence and whose teammates had this much confidence in them this early?
I mean, without being super ironic, Paige Bueckers, like,
Right.
I mean, to be honest, I mean, you're looking at Paige Bueckers from, her freshman year, and I know, she was injured, and she said how much that groomed her mentality and her focus and strength that way. But, let's not forget about what Paige Bueckers did as a freshman, getting UConn to the Final Four and leading the team there. I just think, man, that's a great question, and I'm flipping through my mental list of players there, freshmen.
Paige feels like a great one because, even Caitlin was obviously very good, young, and there's been some great freshmen on the men's side that have been high draft picks, NBA players now. But to have the trust of your teammates like this from basically go, it feels so rare. Paige, certainly, I remember some of that coming out of UConn when she was a freshman, but it's rare, which is why they're in the Final Four with her as their best player as a freshman.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm going to stick with Paige just because that's my most clear frame of reference in terms of the poise and composure piece, but also that they're matched up together. So I think Paige may see a little bit of her in Juju, right? And maybe try to use it against her, and that's what I always used to say as a coach too. It's like you want to do what is disruptive, right? Offensively, you want to do what you don't like to guard. So do that, right? And I think that's going to be, if they are matched up against one another, I think that's going to be certainly intriguing to watch and to see how they challenge one another in that way. But Juju Watkins, I think she's 9 points or 8 points away from becoming the all-time leader in scoring for freshmen in NCAA history. I mean, you have just record breakers across the board tonight, obviously with Caitlin Clark playing and Paige Bueckers just coming back from injury as seamlessly as she has. I mean, there's just so many just warrior mentality examples that we're going to be watching in these young women. And I just love the fact that they're getting the love that they are getting, right?
Yeah.
I played in the Final Four, back in the day. But, I mean, there were so many. It was packed. There was over 20,000 people in there. But now we're talking millions now, millions of eyeballs and so many different ways to watch the games tonight. I know that Kalia Copper, she's playing overseas, and she said, hey, the game comes on at 2:15, but I'm still going to watch it. You know what I'm saying? So there's so many eyes on it, and I think the WNBA also has done such a great job of just being in lockstep with these young people and the example that they have right now to be great and to take it to the next level. And, the questions that come up with, Caitlin Clark's going to the league and Cameron Brink going to the league and all this. And I'm like, yeah, it's amazing. And I love that people are going to follow them into the WNBA. And I think that's why you've seen the WNBA retweeting a lot of, college information, because they're trying to also connect the dots with the league and these college players so people stay engaged.
For sure, and but the ESPN WNBA draft commercials are one of the best ad series I've seen for promos in a long time. They are so funny. And by the way, Mystics fans, I will say, you should definitely keep an eye on Aaliyah Edwards tonight. One of the latest mock drafts I looked at, WNBA mock drafts, had her mock to Washington in the first round, which, by the way, draft next week. We'll probably have Christy back sooner rather than later to talk about that because, of course, she will be on the it's new. Christy, I'm booking you on the air now. Sorry, that's so unprofessional, but I'm doing it anyway.
I love it.
But, of course, Christy be on the calls all year long for the Mystics. Christy, always a pleasure to chat. Always great to talk hoops with you. Thank you so much. And I guess we'll have you back soon as we look towards the championship game and then ultimately the draft not too far after.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. I love talking about the game. I love so much. So I appreciate the opportunity.
You got it. Christy Winters-Scott, everybody with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, total left turn. We will get back to especially the Iowa-LSU game as we get closer to tip-off later on in the show, as we are carrying, Christy mentioned all the ways to watch, alt casts, all that kind of stuff that ESPN is doing. But you can also listen to the games on Westwood One, including right here on the Team 980 tonight, pregame starting at 6:45. But coming up at 5 o'clock next, we will hear from Mayor Muriel Bowser, as she was on Kevin Sheehan's show earlier today, talking about the monumental move to stay in the District of Columbia. You got to hear how that also affects the Commanders' pursuit of RFK. That's all next on the Team 980. the Hoffman Show, Hour 2. We are live at the Green Turtle here in Navy Yard, where you can get one heck of a special here today. The Draft Pass, which gets you a appetizer and unlimited 5-cent beers for $20. So $20, you get the appetizer, and then it is 5-cent beers after that. Or with that, after that, I don't know. It depends on what order you want to eat and drink. That's up to you. The point is, you pay $20, they hand you an appetizer, and then go, what kind of beer would you like? And that beer costs you a nickel, and that is here at the Green Turtle. And I apologize to the folks here at the Green Turtle for doing the worst promo of a great special that has ever been done in the history of radio. Coming up later on in the show, a good discussion on the line class coming up in the 2024 NFL Draft via Take Command. Logan Paulson will be with us coming up at 5:30 on that front. But right now, it's time for Not My Beat. Anthony, do you want to play the sounder, or do we just want to get into it?
I think we should just get into it.
Okay, because we don't actually have a guest. The guest was on Kevin Sheehan's show earlier today, and that was the mayor of the District of Columbia. That is right, Mayor Muriel Bowser, of course, has been in the news thanks to the arena deal that she struck with Ted Leonsis last week to keep the Capitals and Wizards not to go to Potomac Yards, but back in D.C., where, editorial opinion here, they belong. Bowser and Kevin talked for quite a while. The full interview, of course, available in the Kevin Sheehan Show podcast. No, not that one, the other one. Feed wherever you get your podcast and on the Rewind on the Odyssey app. It was 11 a.m. is when she was on today, if you would like to rewind. But I think Kevin asked a good series of questions that I want to touch on here about kind of how Bowser played her hand. Because one thing that I think Mayor Bowser got criticized from or criticized about is that she fell asleep at the wheel. That somehow she is responsible for the Virginia thing happening, when I think when we look at it now, we go, well, it's pretty clear to her that they were never going to leave in the first place. So what, did she lose faith in the fact that Ted was actually going to take the teams out? Because I feel like that's a good starting point for kind of the rest of this discussion.
I always thought, as I said, I knew I've been involved in a lot of development deals. I've been mayor for almost 10 years. I chaired the council's economic development committee before that, when I was on the council for 8 years. And there's certain things that successful economic development deals that have public money involve. And when they start off kind of behind closed doors and you don't know what the terms are and there's nothing signed and the legislature's not involved, it kind of opens the door to a lot of risk. And I just always believed that this was a risky proposition from that political point of view, from a performance point of view, from a brand point of view. And quite frankly, I wondered if the final product would be at all interesting, or would it be kind of a knockoff building that, we've seen happen around us before.
So she clearly had faith that D.C. was where they would ultimately land, and thus that influences heavily how she goes about her business. But I also wonder if she knew all along or felt all along that Ted couldn't leave based off of what ultimately was ruled by the Attorney General. Of course, that would have been challenged had they needed to challenge it. Or that he just wasn't going to be up for the legal fight. And that eventually he'd be like, all right, look, if you're going to make us jump through all these hoops, then we'll just work with you and stay in D.C. because that's still an option for us. So were there, what did she make of the safeguards? And were there, in her mind, safeguards existing already to keep Monumental in D.C.? Again, Mayor Bowser earlier today with Kevin Sheehan.
Well, we will update our lease with them, and those are part of the documents that are to be negotiated. They have 2 leases with us here at Capital One and at the Entertainment and Sports Complex. And so our commitment is tied to a 2050 commitment.
So that now, in case there's any chances that they try to skate early again, they're going to make sure that this thing is ironclad. Here's the thing I would say about the previous agreement. My very rudimentary understanding of this definitely made it seem as if the Monumental side was going to have a tough uphill legal battle. Now, they have lawyers. Their lawyers are very good. And I only read so much about this. So this is a limitedly informed opinion because, in part, the Monumental folks never really got the chance to push back against this publicly. And I saw the argument from the D.C. side. And that argument felt very sound to me, which is essentially this. We made a deal, financially speaking, based off the fact that you would be here until whatever the old date was. I think it was 2047. And there's no way, if you could have left earlier, that we would have given you the rates and the numbers and the financing in the way that we did. It would have cost you a lot more money to have that freedom and that flexibility. So you agreed to the terms, and now you're trying to use a loophole to get out. And sometimes loopholes are there, and you can jump through them. But it is something that I think that Monumental would have had a very tough battle to do. Now it doesn't matter because they're staying. So who cares? But I can guarantee you all that stuff will be much more ironclad this time around and locked in until 2050. But that does beg the question in terms of moving forward. Okay, well, you knew that this Virginia thing fell through, so why didn't you push for a harder deal? Like, initially you're offering $500 million. Now you're giving them $515 million to lock this thing down when they have less leverage. Why did you do that? Mayor Bowser earlier today with Kevin Sheehan.
This is a great deal because what we want, we don't want a half renovation. We want a renovation that is going to last until 2050. And we know, we've looked at all of the sports investments in arenas around the country. We know what it's going to take for them to be competitive. And we also want them to be able to build winning teams here, and the facilities are important.
All right, so that is Mayor Bowser in part earlier this morning here on the Team 980, joining Kevin Sheehan. We'll hear more from the mayor next, including what this arena is actually going to look like moving forward, plus some of the more municipal-sided questions, some of the things that Ted Leonsis, including the crime around the arena, that he has made very clear was a big deal to him. How has the mayor addressed that, and how is she continuing to plan on addressing those issues? You'll hear more from Mayor Bowser next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We are live on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. Of course, we are live at the Green Turtle today in Navy Yard for Nats opening day. Plenty of seats available as everyone emptied out and went over to Nats Park, but that is not going to be the case for long. Nats hanging in there 2-1 is the score at the end of 3. But tonight, of course, this place will be packed out ahead of the NCAA tournament games. LSU, Iowa getting started just after 7 o'clock. We have our coverage on the Team 980 on Westwood 1 starting at 6:45. And luckily for you, the Draft Pass special here at the Green Turtle will continue on. $20 for a select appetizer, and then from there, unlimited 5-cent beers. That is not a typo. I have not been told that is incorrect. 5-cent beers when you get the Draft Pass special, starting with that $20 appetizer here at the Green Turtle. Right now, we continue talking about what Mayor Bowser had to say. If you missed her earlier today on the Kevin Sheehan Show, of course, the full interview is available in Kevin's show's podcast feed. But what will this stadium look like? I think that is one of the key questions here. And we talked about it a bit last week when Jim Van Stone, the president of Monumental, joined us. But you have still the same walls. There's only so much you can expand the exterior structure. So it's about remaking the inside and then possibly expanding a little bit on the outside and into the Gallery Place area. But what vision was sold by Leonsis and Monumental to Mayor Bowser? Here was the mayor earlier today.
Well, the design, there have been a lot of preliminary drawings, and they're kind of just that. I think one of the biggest things that needs to get done is a fan experience that's closer to the ice and closer to the court. So they'll flatten the inner bowl, if that makes sense, a little bit, and they'll make the public spaces, the common areas, a lot more modern. And the outside-facing facade will also change in a way that's more open and inviting and better connect. So it's not like just a box, but it will be a more porous opening.
So I think that's interesting, and I hope that this becomes the case as someone who's been to enough sporting events in other cities, and I'm sure many of you listening have, obviously, as well. Travel's not exactly an exclusive thing. Matt Essex over here like, yeah, other people can also leave the district. Thanks, Matt, for your encouragement. But anyway, the point is, when you go to a stadium, and we've seen this, I think, a lot with, like, visuals of NBA playoff games in places like Toronto. They have Jurassic Park outside, and we see this in other places that have kind of that tailgate scene. The hope is that eventually DC can have something like that as well once you get through these 3 phases of construction, is that there's a place to gather, and then ultimately whether it's just kind of more of an everyday, every game eatery type of scene, or a true, like, hey, we have overflow because the Wizards are all of a sudden good and the Caps are competing for championships and not enough people can get in the building but want to be around. And I think of what it was like to cram out on F Street when the Caps won the Cup. Like, that would be amazing. And I think that's a big part of it is kind of, the point of being in the center and being in D.C. is you have this communal element to it. And so making spaces where you can actually act on that, I think, is a tremendous part of this plan. Of course, getting people to Capital One Arena is going to involve alleviating fears, whether they be real or not, about crime in Chinatown around the Gallery Place area. And while crime is down in most cities, if not all cities around the country, there's a big accept, and unfortunately, statistically speaking, it has been accept this one. Now, I will also say the 2024 data through Q1 looks much better than it has in previous years, and hopefully that's because Mayor Bowser and the council have actually done things to correct these problems. How does she alleviate the concerns of Ted Leonsis that trend is going to continue?
I think that Ted and his team never landed on that issue. They'll tell you first and foremost they were looking for more space, and I think this updated arrangement contemplates more space for them, and so that's probably their biggest consideration. But anytime people tell us that they're concerned about human services needs or crime around a facility, that's going to have our attention. And we, as a city, we're driving down crime. Year over year, we're down 30% in most of the dangerous crime categories, including what really had people's attention last year in carjacking. So we know that the interventions that we put in place last summer and more permanently with Secure DC, crime bill, that we're going to continue to see those numbers go down.
And certainly, I think all of us here in the district, whether we are natives and residents or frequent visitors, certainly hope that is the case. Now, there is one other large looming question for the District of Columbia when it comes to sports moving forward, and that is getting the football team back, and specifically back to RFK. There are a number of hurdles. I know Kevin asked about the Senate and where that bill is there. If you want to hear that answer, you're going to have to rewind in the Odyssey app. But another is the neighborhood. And we saw the neighborhood step up in Alexandria, and I think it's part of the reason that someone like Louise Lucas felt so emboldened to do what she did in the Virginia State Senate, is because the neighborhood, for the amount that they spoke out, was like, we don't want this monumental facility in Potomac Yards. We don't want this in Alexandria. There's been some early chatter and some early outreach going on between the team, the city, and the neighborhood over by RFK Stadium. So as far as Mayor Bowser is concerned and the things that she's heard, how do the folks who live over on that side of town feel about a new stadium popping up there?
Well, I think they feel like they want what I just described. I went to a meeting at the Kingman Park Neighbors Association a few months back, and the neighbors listed to me what they wanted to see happen there. And I agreed with them that it should be a mix of uses. Now, you will recognize that some favor having a stadium, some don't, but I wouldn't say that it is it's a very mixed bag of opinions related to what we do next. But what everybody agrees on is that D.C. should control its destiny and should control the land. That's why we're very focused on getting the land.
Right.
And many people, there have been, surveys going back years and years, and people want a fair deal. Just like here, people wanted us to make sure we negotiated well with the taxpayers' dollars. And they would expect the same. We've had a number of models, financing models that we use. This one is different from Nats Park, is different from Audi Field. And so we would be looking at that parcel, the right financing tool that was the best deal for the district taxpayer.
So I think that's interesting on a number of fronts, and we'll get deeper into the financials in a second with the last bite you'll hear from the mayor's interview earlier today with Kevin. But I think the idea of like a mixed-use facility and a mixed-use area for a football stadium is very different than what you're going to hear about for a baseball stadium or a basketball stadium or a hockey stadium. I mean, we're talking about 82 nights a year plus concerts. So we're talking, in the way Monumental wanted to program Alexandria, we're talking about 150 to 200, maybe even 300 nights a year where they're going to be trying to use that stadium. I mean, Capital One Arena, Jim Van Stone told us last week, like in an ideal world, they have it in use like 300 nights a year between Capitals hockey, which hopefully they can get close to 50, 60 games if they're in the playoffs and make a run towards the Cup. Same thing with the Wizards on the basketball side. You got 41 home games plus some preseason games plus hopefully eventually some playoff games. Then for Cap One, you have Georgetown basketball. They want to move some Mystics games. I think there's an agreement to move like up to 4 and then potential playoff games over to Capital One. So we're talking about 100 sporting nights a year plus another potential 200 nights of concerts and other uses. And that is very different than a football stadium that 10 games a year, 9 plus 1 preseason or 8 plus 2 preseason, depending on which part of the 17-game cycle you're on, plus, let's say, 5 or 6 concerts that come through, another 5 to 10 soccer matches or rugby matches or anything else like that. That's very different 20 to 30 nights a year. Plus, you get all the mixed-use stuff of like, oh, and we got a bunch of new restaurants that came in town versus the traffic of an event every single day, most weeks. Like, that's a very different ask. And so that is certainly going to be the sell. The reality of that is like those 10 football Sundays or 10 football days might be so terrible that you're like, I'm not dealing with this. Get me out of here. All these people trying to park in my yard, whatever the thing is, you might just be like, I'm out. Because it feels like, while it's 10 days, it feels like the entire fall and part of winter, this thing is looming over you. So I get it from all sides here. But it is going to be a very interesting conversation, and I think it is a different conversation than the basketball, hockey type of mixed-use facility. By the way, you're also talking about 2 to 3 times the number of people versus an arena. Last but not least, this is a very interesting thing. When you get into the actual money of it, and this was kind of my thing last week. I was like, well, if Josh Harris just wants to pay for it, then I don't see what the issue is going to be. But, of course, they're going to want some city financing as much as they can get. They will certainly take. So how much does the $515 million that the district is giving to Monumental going to affect the Commanders' pursuit of RFK? One last time, the mayor of the District of Columbia, Muriel Bowser, earlier today on the Kevin Sheehan Show.
One has absolutely nothing to do with the other. We have been pursuing both for many years. And if anything, it will allow us, having Monumental on the right track, would allow us to focus our energies, our planning energies and political energies on RFK.
So I would love to know more detail on how that actually works from the money standpoint, how the budgets work. But she says it has nothing to do. And maybe she's had enough conversations with the Commanders that are like, look, we'll make it work. We just need you to get us the land and let the D.C. decide for itself what it is. But with that's encouraging if you want to see the Commanders back at RFK. When we get back here on the Team 980, let you hear a little bit of our conversation earlier today from Take Command. Logan and I went through all the non-quarterbacks, especially the top quarterbacks. We did a little bit on like Penix and Nix and folks down the draft board. But we went through the rest of the draft board, if you will, on the offensive side. And we're going to let you hear a little bit about the offensive line class, because certainly it is a group that the Commanders are extremely interested in. So a little Take Command next here on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live, of course, on YouTube too at the Team 980. Folks rolling in here around the corner from Nats Park as we are at the Green Turtle. They've got their Draft Pass special. This table that just sat down over here. Have you guys heard of the Draft Pass special yet? So it's $20. You get a select appetizer and then unlimited 5-cent draft beers. So I don't know if y'all have ordered yet, but if you haven't, there we go. And if you're listening on your radio box and headed your way over here, you can also order the Draft Pass special, $20 for a select appetizer, and then unlimited 5-cent draft beers. Earlier today, Logan Paulson and I sat down to record Take Command, of course, the podcast about the Washington Commanders that you can listen to multiple times per week on your favorite podcast feed, a fine Odyssey production. And we went into the class as a whole. We spent so much time talking about the quarterbacks. What about everybody else? We wanted to let you hear a little bit of that conversation specifically on the offensive line class. And thus, here we go. Take Command on a Monday here on the Hoffman Show.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in to the Take Command podcast. Logan Paulson there, Craig Hoffman here. And this week, Logan, we are going to give the people everything but what we've been talking about nonstop since January. We are going to go into the rest of the NFL draft. Obviously, the entire future of the Commanders organization really does hinge in a lot of ways. They're a major pivot point on that number 2 pick. I mean, the Niners have proven that you can miss on a top 5 pick at quarterback and still have it all work out in the end. So it's not like if that pick fails, the whole thing, just shut it down, we're over. But, obviously we spent undue time on that because if you get that pick right, the trajectory of the franchise changes immensely. But there are 250-something picks after the top 2, and there's a lot of football players to talk about. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through each position group, including quarterback outside of kind of the group of 4 that we have talked about. And then we're going to do the offense today, the defense later on in the week, and give the highlights, the players that we like, the players that we don't like as much as everyone else. And then something that we hinted at last week, Logan, that I think we're actually just on a personal level most excited about, the freak list for each one. Who is the best athlete of the position in the 2024 NFL draft? Anything else you want to add on the front end here?
No, as always, Craig, you did a great job kind of laying it all out there. So I think we should just get it started.
All right, let's do it. We're going to start as where there's a lot of people think we should start. Always start with your lines. You got to build out your line. So we're going to start with the offensive line, and we're going to start outside at tackle, and then we'll go to the interior guys. And I think this tackle class is really interesting, Logan, because I feel like the number of players who are in the upper echelon has grown as the process has gone on. Guys like Amarius Mims, guys like J.C. Latham have joined the Joe Alts. Olu Fashanu's stock is all over the place, depending on where you ask. And so, like what does your tiers look like at tackle in terms of this class? And is it really, in your mind, as deep as a lot of people say it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a great point there. One of the things about this group that's so interesting is like you had guys like Tyler Guyton, Amarius Mims, even Troy Fatano to a certain extent, the tackle from UW, who I think a lot of people thought would be there when Washington was picking at 36. But now, kind of as the draft gets ever closer, like it's almost like clockwork. Those guys just get pushed up and up and up because it's hard to find big athletic dudes. So I think if I was going to give you my big board or my kind of tops at the position, I'd probably go Joe Alt would be my first guy. First or second guy, I really like this. I really like Talisi Fuaga from Oregon State, the tackle. The only reason I give Alt a slight edge is I think Fuaga might be a guard at the next level. Either way, my confidence level in Fuaga being an excellent football player is extremely high. So either whether it's right tackle or it's guard, I think you've got a guy who's got a nasty streak. He's got a physicality. He's got a technical acumen that you really like. And Joe Alt, I think a lot of people have as kind of like this blue chip prospect. I don't quite feel the same way about him. I think when you see him in person, he's a little bit younger in terms of his physicality than I think a lot of people are aware of. So I think I think they're close, but I think he's going to be a good pro. I think the problem with him is he's not going to be a good pro this year. It might be next year or the following year. Just what does his runway look like? Is it 6 games? Is it 2 seasons? Is it 3 seasons? Is he Colton Miller where he doesn't get good until it's time to give him an extension? I don't know. But I think that's kind of my first tier. I'd probably put Troy Fatanu if not in that tier, in the one right below it. He's the tackle guard from UW. He's 6'4", 315, and I mean he's just such a tremendous athlete. Like he's not Trent Williams athletic, but like in terms of his twitch and his snap, I got vibes of that, shades of that, obviously. And I'm not saying it's a 1-to-1 comparison there, but that's the kind of athlete that gets you excited about the position. He measured in at 34-inch arms at the combine, which to me is a huge deal because everyone thought he was for sure a guard. I thought he was for sure a guard, but with that type of length, you say, and the type of foot speed he's got, maybe that's the guy. Then I'd probably go Fashanu after that. Fashanu, Guyton, and then Amarius Mims would be my next tier. And I'd throw J.C. Latham in there as well. It's kind of that. And maybe, so let me backtrack that a little bit. I'd probably put J.C. Latham in the same tier as Troy Fatanu, and then I'd probably go Fashanu, the tackle from Penn State, Mims, and then Guyton is how I would probably flesh that out.
So are you comfortable with all of those guys going in the top 20? Because it feels like where mock drafts are, that kind of is where this is trending. Like there's going to be a run. And I would say there's 6 guys there, Alt, Fontenau, Fuaga, Fashanu, Latham, Mims, or 7 if you include Guyton. And the way some of these mock drafts are going, like they might all go in the top 20, certainly in the top 25. Now, there's also a chance that there's a run on some other position, and then all of a, you get a run on wide receivers, and all of a sudden one of these guys is available for you at 36, which would be sick. But like, if you're a team drafting inside the top 20, are you comfortable taking all of those guys, or is that a little too rich?
Yeah, I think, if I was going to give a range for like Amarius Mims or Tyler Guyton, I'd probably say in a perfect world, it's between 25 and 35 is where you're picking those guys. And I think with Mims, again, the physicality is insane. Watching him on film, I mean, there's not many people on the face of the planet that look like him. We talk about freaks, like he's going to be in the conversation for that for sure. And then Tyler Guyton, again, kind of is a physical freak, the way he moves, the way he bends. It's going to push him up. But I think when you look at their film, like Guyton is a little inconsistent in 2023, much better in 2022, but only has 2 years at the position. And then you look at Mims, he only plays 7 games. Now he's dominant in those 7 games, but 7 games over the course of a college career is not a lot. So a lot of doubt about where he's going to be and what he falls into. But those would be the guys I'd probably push down because of just questions about consistency. But in terms of athletic frame, I think if someone took him at 20, if someone took him at 15, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, someone did that. It's like, because the athletic upside with both those guys is pretty insane. So,
all right. So is there a guy that you like either in that group or I'm going to say the next, well, first of all, stop me when I hit, we've left the tier, right? So the next tier, that's like the top 2 or 3 tiers, whatever the next tier is for you. Stop me when we leave it. I'm going to read off Scouts Inc.'s list. Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. Kingsley Suamatia, BYU. And I believe it's Suamatia. I heard that on Mina Kimes' podcast. I'm saying cool. Suamatia. Sorry, Kingsley Suamatia. Patrick Paul, Dominic Puni, Roger Rosengarten. Out of Washington.
So I'd probably stop you there. I'd say,
so
I think
the kid out of Kansas is the last one that you would.
And I think he's a guard for me. Like I don't even have him with the tackles. I think a lot of people have him as an interior player because he's kind of this big barrel-chested guy. But I'd say Jordan Morgan, Kingsley Suamatia, and I'd honestly put Patrick Paul maybe in that group. Again, like you're kind of looking. The reason Patrick Paul for me keeps getting brought up into this upper tier is like in the same reason Amarius Mims and Tyler Guyton might go at 15. Patrick Paul is just a big, freaky dude. He ran well at the combine. He's got 36-inch arms. He's 6'7". He's 340. Like he moves well. And you can't find people like that. So someone's going to take a reach on him. And so if the Commanders picked him and said, hey, man, Cornelius Sugas, you're going to start for the first 6 weeks of the season, but Patrick Paul is going to develop into a starter for us. Like, I think that's a decent play for them at 36 or 40. So I'd probably classify those guys together. Kirian Amadiji, that's how I'm going to say his name, from Yale, is a guy that I think is really interesting because of the athletic upside. The problem with him is like he's got physically everything you want. It's just I don't know if I saw the level of physical dominance from him at Yale. So I'm always kind of like with small school guys, like it is a big jump. It's a big jump, especially for offensive linemen, because you go from, blocking kind of untalented college players, no offense to the Ivy Leagues, to blocking real deal NFL football players. And a lot of people have a hard time with that jump. So, and then after that, you mentioned Rosen Gardner, Blake Fisher, some other guys, Christian Jones, another guy in that kind of next tier who I think are really good football players. I just worry about the athletic upside. So I think it's it's interesting that kind of that fourth tier, the Jordan Morgan, the Kingsley Sumatia, is that how you say it? Matia, Kirian Amadiji, like those guys have the athletic upside to be something at the next level. And you get kind of really solid football players after them. Again, Blake Fisher, Roger Rosengard, Christian Jones. But you always question, do you have the athletic ability to be an NFL starter consistency? Like, I love Christian Jones's tape. I loved him at the Senior Bowl. But I'm always kind of in the back of my mind saying, are you anything more than a swing guy? Which is not a bad deal. But for the Washington Commanders, that's something you definitely have to be asking yourself.
All right, last but not least, the freak on this list. I feel like there's actually a couple of guys. Patrick Paul for sure. Amarius Mims. Like there's a couple candidates, but who's your all freak team tackles? I'll give you two.
I think that's the thing about it is Kingsley Sumatia is like he runs a 5.40 40 and he's 330 pounds. Like Amarius Mims is the freakiest guy of the bunch because he's 6'8". He's 340. He ran a 5.40 40. Probably had a 4.9 in him before he pulled his hamstring. His hands, man, like I can't even fathom. His hands are as big as this sheet of paper. They're 11.5 inches. Like that's what that looks like. If you can see it, like that's his hand. Take a piece of paper.
What the hell?
Put your hand on it. That's his hand. How crazy is that? He is a huge man, and they just don't make him like that. And so to have a guy who moves that way, like I've watched clips of him running bolt upright, Craig, like as tall as he can be, full 6'8", and somebody coming to hit him and him taking a hand and putting it on the DB's chest, and it looks like the DB is ejected like in a cartoon from the screen. And there's just only a couple people on the face of God's green earth that can do that. So in a class of really freaky dudes, like Joe Alt, man, he's 6'9", he's 330, he ran a 5'1", like he moves really well, he bends really well. Like Amarius Mims is in a class and a tier all of his own. And so I think like that's why this group is like probably the most fun to talk about in the draft, especially these top, 10, 11 guys, because they're just, it's so special to get a group of guys that are so consistently athletic and big and physical. Like it's just a fun group to watch.
All right. So that leads us then to another group where there's a couple of fun guys to talk about, but not quite as deep as the tackles. That's interior offensive line. And one guy that, like, I'm going to separate him out and we're going to spend 90 seconds on him on his own. What is Graham Barton for you? Because I've heard him talked about as a four, like Nate had him as a 4-position guy, right?
Yeah.
He can play left guard, center, right guard, right tackle. He's like, I think he's got plus upside at all 4 of those positions. I think that there are people in the league that say he could start at left tackle. Scouts Inc. has him listed in front of me as a center. What the hell is Graham Barton besides good?
I mean, I think he's good. Like, I mean, that's what he is. Like, I think that's like why you love watching him. He's got the physical twitch. Like when you watch him, again, his pro day was amazing. Like the way he moved for a man that big. I don't remember if he ran sub-5, but it was close. All of his 3-cone stuff was great. His jump stuff was great for the position. And he reminds me a little bit of Skoronski from last year, kind of a guy from a length standpoint that's probably an interior player, but from a foot speed athletic standpoint could get you by on the outside. He reminds me of Baltimore has a swing tackle. I forget what his name is, but number 65 for them, who, again, he literally can play any position. He's their big tight end, but he's played right tackle, left guard, left guard. I don't know if he can snap, but that's what he brings. And I think he is just a heck of a football player. And someone that I think is a first-round player. So of this like interior group, he's probably my number one guy we're going to talk about. But like he played left tackle in his last year at Duke, and I think he looked pretty good at it. I think that's probably not his best position, right? I think he's probably more of an interior player. Like we talked about Troy Fautanu from UW, who I think could play left tackle in the NFL. I don't see that same thing from Graham Barton. So that 4-position flexibility, I think is probably a good characterization of what he does. But I think in a pinch, he could get you through a couple games at left if he needed to, because of the athlete and because of the mindset that he plays with.
Which is interesting because that's kind of a similar scouting report on Jackson Powers Johnson. There's kind of this thought, and I'm stealing this straight from Nate on Mina Kimes' pod that I listened to a little bit earlier today, but he's like, traditionally center was like not a very good athlete, but they're so smart, we got to find a way to get them on the field. And Jackson Powers Johnson is the opposite. He was like a tremendous athlete who they're like, oh, well, we got to teach you how to play center because this is where you're best at. But he's kind of figuring stuff out. So you got like these 2 incredible athletes that are probably centers or going to be drafted as centers, although we'll see with Barton. But then you got, I would say it feels like a pretty big drop off between those guys and the next group of interior offensive linemen, which includes another center, Zach Frazier out of West Virginia, and then guys like Zach Zinter and Christian Haynes out of UConn. Anybody else that you'd put in kind of that next group of interior O-linemen?
Yeah, so I think for me, about Jackson Powers Johnson just for a second. And I think one of the things about him is I don't know if he's the athlete people want to characterize him as. I think he's a true center who could play guard if you needed him to. I think he's a big kind of gap scheme player who's very strong and very powerful, but I don't know if he has like the elite movement skills. So I think he's going to be a little bit of an acquired taste per team. He's not like Linderbaum a couple years ago who, where did he go to school? It doesn't matter where he went to school, but he plays for the Baltimore Ravens now. And he is a playmaking center, right? He can get to the second line. He's your Travis Kelce, right? Or your Jason Kelce, excuse me. He can move really well. He's got good play strength. He can cut off a shade. I'm not sure Jackson Powers Johnson fits in that same type of mold, which is why I'm a little lower on him. I almost think it's kind of between him and Zach Frazier in terms of like what stylistically do you want to be like. If I'm a outside zone team, like Zach Frazier is a really good football player, and I have a lot of admiration for how he's handled the offseason process. I think he broke his leg or something like that late in the year and still participated in the combine. Like he's a tough football playing Johnny. Looked a little undersized, but again, like there's a precedent for undersized center being able to make it work. Then you mentioned, then I probably go, for me, a guy that I like a lot and I'm very high on is Cooper Bebe from Kansas State. He is a heck of a football player, big barrel-chested son of a gun that Fred Smoot comped to Pac-Man, and I think that's a relatively fair comp because he just eats up linebackers, man. And he's got great footwork for kind of how wide he is, and he can run, he can pull, and he's nasty. I got shades of like a poor man's who's the guard for Indianapolis? Nelson.
Quentin Nelson.
Like kind of that big torso that can just run linebackers down. I think he needs some work in pass pro, but I like the edge that he plays with. I like his mindset. And so for me, I could see him being like a top 60 player. So, and then I go Christian Haynes from UConn, very similar type of evaluation, not quite as raw, not tight, doesn't have the raw physicality of Cooper Bebe, but like I loved him at the Senior Bowl, man. Just approached it with the right attitude. Just a dog, just really a dog. And then I'd probably go Dominic Puny from Kansas, just because of how big and how strong he is. And then it gets a little bit dicey. You talked about this already, Craig, about like it's kind of your flavor, right? You got Christian Mahogany from Boston College. You got a physical mauler, but you wonder about the athleticism. Cedric Van Pran, true center, kind of probably the first center off the board if he came out last year, but didn't. Again, wonder about his overall athleticism and what is the true value of a center. So again, there are some guys, but I do think it's not quite as dynamic, in my opinion, as the rest of the class. So.
All right, so
as the tackle class, let me say that.
Right, yeah. So BB is the guy, or Bebe is the guy that you like, I would say, more than others, just to kind of keep with our format here. Sounds like Jackson Powers Johnson's the guy that maybe you're not as high on as some others, but also there's going to be a lot of people that agree with you.
Yeah.
Who amongst the interior lists? Well, let me ask you too, and we'll try to keep this relatively short and keep this moving with some speed here. But like of the late round guys where the Commanders might take a flyer on someone at the guard position especially, is there someone that you like, let's say fourth round or later, that you think could be a starter in the league?
Yeah, I think it's always tough with with an interior offensive lineman because it really is flavor how the interviews goes. Brandon Coleman from TCU, I really liked his film at guard, but struggled a little bit in pass pro at the Senior Bowl. But again, don't overvalue a Senior Bowl performance. Layden Robinson from Texas A&M is a guy that I think is a lot of fun to watch. He plays with kind of this edge, the right kind of mindset, a little bit of a pass pro issue for him, but I just like the edge that he plays with, the power, the explosiveness that he's got. It's just about, can he kind of get it all coordinated and work it out? So, and then obviously Zach Zinter from Michigan is a guy that I think, coming from Michigan, being in that system, big fella, is a guy that probably not a fourth round player, probably more of a third round player, but a guy, if he takes a little bit of a slide, maybe you feel pretty good about it. So.
Whatever it's worth, obviously they've got a lot more guys listed as tackle, but Scouts Inc. has Zinter as their top guard. So
top guard. No, I think
worth.
He's coming off an injury, right? Am I thinking of the right guy? There's so many Michigan guys in this class. So I think Zach Zinter is the guy that tore his ACL late in the year, I want to say. And so he would have been the first guard selected probably, but obviously the injury, if it's the guy that I'm thinking of, and there's a lot of guys in my head at the moment, is going to probably miss some of the offseason because of the injury.
Gotcha. Okay. Freak. Let's like 15, 20 seconds. Who's the interior line all freak team?
I mean, I think I've already kind of alluded to it. Graham Barton, to me, is the guy that you're just I like him a lot. I like his film a lot. He tested way better than I thought. He moves well. He moves like, I don't want to say that because he moves like that on the field. So he's a guy that I'd love it if he was a Commander. You know, him, like Tyler Guyton, Amarius, like those types I kind of put them in the same category. And if I'm that high on him, usually someone else in the league's that high on him, and usually he's probably not going to get out of the first round. Like on this list that I'm using, he's listed at 29. He's my best interior player at the moment, if you don't count Troy Fontenot, and I'm not going to. I'm going to count him as a tackle, but yeah, really good football player and really freak athlete. So.
And then quick double check. It does look like Zinter had the ACL tear late in the year. So you were correct as usual on that. Mikey M's with us, of course, host of NFL. Mr. Fortier, how are you? And are you using the headphones that I sent you?
I am using the headphones that you sent me, so I'll let you pulled over. And I got to tell you, man, seeing the craziness coming out of Chicago today with the Justin Fields comment, with the DC abruptly resigning, it's just like giving me flashbacks to what this team used to be like. And I'm like, wow, I'm talking about football in a stadium? That feels odd.
Right. One, God, this call quality is just exceptional. So just, I got to say, I'm going to send you a clip later just so you can hear how clear you are. Two, we actually, so earlier in the show, we did a segment called This, That, and the Other Thing, and we wound up putting the Bears stuff in that. And yeah, it felt very oddly familiar, but also safely distant, which I think is good. All right, we got a lot to get to and not a lot of time. So first, let's...
Yes. James Smith-Williams just pulled up and honked at me. I'm on the radio with Craig Hoffman right now. Do you want to say something?
What's up, James?
How you doing, man?
What's up, James? Although you probably can't hear it because this is just in Sam's headphones.
Quick. Craig, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Feeling good. Just talking to Sam. Last time we did a hit with Sam, he put Matt Paris and Ben Standing on, so this is an upgrade.
Way better. Yeah, way better.
Yeah.
Definitely an upgrade.
All right, let's make sure nobody gets in trouble here. All right, James, drive home safely.
Thank you. You have a good one.
All right, goodbye. James Smith-Williams, everybody. I mean, that's been an ongoing bit.
Oh, okay.
I think Travis Kelce's got the best bit of all. He's just dating Taylor Swift. So, forget the lyrics. and then we got our guy Ian Eagle talking about Travis Kelce finding blank space in the end zone. Now, that's a By the way, I did follow up. For those of you that listened to the end of the show on Monday, we said we're going to have to investigate. Was that, did Noah Eagle feed Ian, his dad, the lyric? I texted Ian. I was like, we might have to have you on the show to do this. And he's like, there's nothing to investigate. I'm just a Swiftie.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh, well, there goes the segment idea, Ian.
Did you see Jason Kelce confirm the rumors, though?
Yes, he kind of did on WIP today, which is very silly. Jason, your podcast is very good and very successful. If you're going to confirm the biggest rumor in the celebrity world,
exactly,
don't do it do it on a radio show, obviously. Don't do it on a radio show. Do it on your own podcast, you moron. I'm just kidding, Jason. You're definitely not a moron. Jason Kelce, not a moron. It was just not the, why am I doing, let's keep going with the comment. We have a new submission to the Real Things Hall of Fame. The F-35 is a fighter jet that the military has. It is very expensive. Very expensive. The F-35 program costs the U.S. government / the military over $1 trillion. This is one of the most expensive things in the U.S. government's budget is the program that makes these planes. Each one is incredibly valuable and expensive. And something happened during a training mission, but this jet leaves, they go on a training mission, and it's in stealth mode, apparently. And the pilot has to eject. So the pilot's like, I'm up out of here. Pilot lands relatively safely, has, I think, an injury or two that has to be tended to, but, is alive. But then they lost the jet. So the jet disappeared from the radar. The U.S. government's like, well, we don't know where the jet is. And so the Buford, which is the suburb not suburb, it's in South Carolina. It's by Charleston. Close enough. If people are actually from there and don't want to say that and want to say it's by Hilton Head, I know I grew up in the state. Leave my geography alone for the sake of the story, which I've now made less efficient by telling you all of those things because I can't help myself. Talk about a plane crash. Hey, we're back. So the F-35 gets essentially lost, and they're like, I don't know where this very expensive warplane went. And lo and behold, sometime the next day or later that day, it crashes somewhere, and luckily no one's hurt. But this $100 million plane is gone. Whoopsies, we crashed the plane. And this is an eyewitness account from a Charleston area television station of someone who heard the crash.
In the bathroom taking a shave, and I heard a screeching, between a screech and a whistle. I said, what in the world is this? And I heard a boom. Then my whole house shook.
White says he didn't realize it was a plane at the time, so he didn't call anybody.
First thought came to me, I said, must beat it right, come on his face or something. I said, well, if the airplane, it needed to be reported, but the thing was flying is too low.
The F-35B airplane wreckage created an extensive debris field.
That boy, we gotta get a drop with the voice because it might be better than Steph Curry's.
I was gonna say, I feel like we have to do a comparison. Can I pull this off with? Yeah, okay. So I had to compare or see if I had enough channels on the board to do this. But we got Steph Curry here. We got Charlie Brown here. And we got our mans here.
His is better, though.
I think his is the best one. His is definitely, it's not quite Charlie Brown. It's definitely close to Steph Curry, though.
Yes.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Nats right now in the top of the 7th, trying to not have their deficit increase. It's 3-1 Pirates. Got 2 runners on there in the top of the 7th, but Nats trying to get their win in their home opener. That is what's going on. Down the street from us is the Hoffman Show, broadcasting live today from the Green Turtle in Navy Yard, of course, around the corner from Nats Park. And if you come on down to the Green Turtle, the seats are filling up, and I'm assuming some of these folks are here to watch Iowa-LSU coming up tonight. Got a bunch of head nods around, of course, if you're on your way and you don't quite get here in time, you can listen to it on the Team 980. Both games tonight, courtesy of Westwood One on our air. But if you are down here at the Green Turtle, do not forget that you can get their incredible special that they are offering today. It is called the Draft Pass. You get $20 for a select appetizer, and then the draft part of the Draft Pass, 5-cent beers. So 5 cents for all draft beers. Once you get that $20 appetizer, that is the Draft Pass special here at the Green Turtle. A great spot to be tonight, Anthony, to watch these games. Iowa-LSU and obviously UConn, USC. We'll talk about those coming up in about 10 minutes. And then pregame starts 40 minutes or so from now. And also the men's games, really tremendous games over the weekend. And the biggest one that everyone wants to talk about for good reason is your boy DJ Burns and NC State coming back. Duke had him early, had him in the first half, if you will. But ultimately, you watch this game, like, it was crazy just to watch it turn there in the second half, and Burns took over. A lot of criticism today for John Shire for not switching up the defense. But ultimately, he just lets Burns continue to cook, and I'll avoid all the Burns cooking, et cetera, puns here. But it didn't end well, obviously, for Duke and NC State. What an hour and a half for their programs, as both teams, by the way, for the Pac going to the Final Four. But what did you see for that heck of a second half from NC State yesterday?
I mean, basketball is truly a game of runs. Like, NC State went on a crazy run. UConn went on an insane run.
Bro.
Talk about 50 minutes of real time without allowing
30-0 in an Elite Eight game? Are you kidding me?
They went on a run. Purdue was on a run. Pretty much we saw runs all weekend long, and I just think NC State, they're also just a testament to, getting hot at the right time. And that's really what, the playoffs is all about, what the postseason is truly about. We see it in the NFL, we see it in the NBA, and now we're seeing it at the collegiate level as well. And they're just riding this hot hand. I don't know what John Shire was thinking, though, allowing DJ Burns to go one-on-one. Like, we know, the comparisons that he's been getting to Zach Randolph. You can't leave him one-on-one. You can't.
Oh, man, no, this is killing me. I thought there was a really funny, Zebo comparison, and I can't think of. I'm have to look this up. Yates tweeted it yesterday.
Kenny Lofton.
What was it?
One? Kenny Lofton.
Kenny Lofton was an outfielder in Major League Baseball. I don't think he was getting compared to Kenny Lofton.
He's a basketball player as well.
We're talking about different Kenny Loftons then.
I'm talking about the basketball player.
That would make a lot more sense. God, the nickname that DJ Burns got was so funny. Gen Zebo. That's what it was.
Gen Zebo is hilarious.
Because, I mean, he does not get off the ground. And yet, I think it was interesting. I'm sure you've seen the Nikola Jokic that he caught Nikola's attention. And they play similarly. Like, obviously, Burns is not Jokic. The skill level that Jokic has is one of one in the history of the sport. But the soft hands, understanding leverages, like all of those kinds of things that he's able to do at the college level. And it is kind of an interesting thing where it's like, okay, also the dude's 23 years old and playing college basketball for a long time. And I do think that's part of the story of this tournament is I think all these teams that have gotten to this Final Four have interesting mixes of youth and experience. And there is something to the experience, especially as, for years – the youth in college basketball dominated because they had the best players, like the one and dones, the Kentuckys, the Dukes, etc., because they were the actual best players in that age range. Now the best players go to Overtime Elite or go to the G League Ignite, which is going to be interesting because the G League shutting down G League Ignite next year. Mm-hmm. But do we see a return to elite talent in college basketball? But what you see in kind of the level of player that's currently playing is Kyle Filipowski for Duke, one of the best players in college of the young guys, and is going to be a high draft pick and has certainly a brighter NBA future than DJ Burns, gets destroyed by DJ Burns. And, they played 3 times this year. NC State figured it out in all the important moments, and thus off they go to the Final Four.
Yeah, I'm excited for those guys. Truly excited for it, but definitely was shocked to see that Duke had this after having played this team already 2 times.
Yeah, it's like, come on. Shouldn't you know better by now? If I tell you UConn or the field, UConn or the other 3 teams?
Gotta go UConn.
I think that's correct. I saw Dan Hurley today was complaining about he was complaining about that he doesn't feel like UConn's getting the love that would happen if this was Duke or Kentucky or Carolina or Kansas, like one of the more long-term blue blood programs. Actually, I don't know if he's right, but I don't think he doesn't have a point. Like if this was a Duke team going for back-to-back titles or Carolina or Kansas or Kentucky, I do think the hype would be a lot bigger than it is. But at the same time, I also think this is just the state of men's college basketball right now that we feel like UConn has stepped into a void of actual talent and greatness where they're the best of the era. And Hurley's an unbelievable coach. Like, I think that we've known that for a long time, and his ascent through the sport, like people have been like, oh, that's a dude. If he can control his temper, like he'll be great. And that's what's happened. But at the same time, like the star power is playing at night. The best, like the 4 biggest stars in college basketball are arguably playing against each other tonight on the women's side of it. And that has, I think, more to do with it, the relative fame that we're talking about here than if UConn had star power and versus like the name on the jersey not being Kansas, Kentucky, Duke, or Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think he necessarily has a good point because guess what? Duke was in it, and I don't think there was a lot of hype surrounding Duke in general. No. And I just feel like, as you've said, like they are a well-coached team. He has a lot of talent over there.
There's some NBA guys on UConn for sure.
But I don't think they have lottery pick names, and I think that's what really draws a lot of people. So the Kentuckys that was getting all the attention, Duke when they were getting all the attention, they had Zion, they had Jason Tatum. These guys were coming 1, 2, 3 off the board. UConn necessarily doesn't have that. I do think they have good role players that will end up on a NBA team. You talk about Jordan Hawkins. You talk about the rookie that's with the Bucks right now. I can't think of his name. But they have players in the NBA, and they're going to be great, but they don't have the star power that, Rob, or the name behind it that, some of these other colleges have. For sure.
Nats just tied it up down the street. Riley Adams, a 2-run bomb in the bottom of the 7th, 3-3. So keeping our eye on that. I will say 100% selfishly, I don't even know if I should say this on the radio, Anthony. I hope this game.
You are being heard there.
I know. Well, the people here at the Green Turtle don't care because they're already here. I want extra innings. Yeah, I want extra innings. That way when I leave at the end of my show, the Metro's not slammed. That's personally where I'm at. That is selfish. I would like the Nats to win in extra innings.
Yep.
It's not like I'm saying I want them to lose. I'm just saying I personally would like to not feel like a sardine on my way home. I got that on the way in. One was enough. But we have a tie game at Nats Park, so that is fun. We love fun. We love competition. Congrats to Riley Adams on your first ever opener home run. Coming up next, though, let's talk about the game that people want us to preview. Let's talk about LSU, Iowa. What are the keys to both sides tonight? We will preview it next here on the Hoffman Show. The Hoffman Show. We are live on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Of course, you miss any part of the show, you can check the podcast clips on YouTube at the Team 980 and on my page at Craig Hoffman as well. You'll notice if you're watching a little bit different of a background today, that is because I am at the Green Turtle around the corner from Nats Park in celebration of Nats opening day there at the park. They have a great special going right now, the Draft Pass special, $20 for an appetizer and then 5-cent beers to go with it. So come on down, enjoy that. And that does go through the game that we are about to talk about right now tonight. And by the way, the tremendous USC UConn game that should be following, that will follow. I don't know if it can be tremendous. I can't guarantee outcomes, but on paper, Bueckers, Watkins, USC UConn going to be phenomenal tonight. But Anthony, who's back in studio running things as always down the street at our place. Anthony, LSU Iowa comes into this with all of the storylines of last year of, you know, Angel and Caitlin's trash talk or expressions or whatever it is that you want to call that stuff. You obviously have some of the just pure officiating stuff and the game itself last year. LSU obviously winning the national championship, spoiling what seemed like a magical run from Clark where she goes through amongst other South Carolina. This year, Clark has been even better. She has been money in all situations. Meanwhile, LSU has not had the year that I think a lot of people imagine. It has not been a smooth transition. Adding Haley Van Lith to the mix, one of the best guards in the country who transferred in from Louisville, and yet they persevere, and here they are with a chance to go back to the Final Four with none other than Iowa in the way. But I also think on top of the seasons they've had and all those storylines, and obviously what a week it's been for the LSU program, the absurd complaining from Kim Mulkey, and then some very legitimate complaining from their coach about an article in the LA Times. Clark now dealing with these big three rumors and all this other stuff that's been swirling about her WNBA future looming, obviously. But I think at the end of the day, when I look at this game tonight, like the basketball is also very different from last year. And there's a couple of key pieces that I want to point out that I think make this interesting. First and foremost is Hannah Stolke, the sophomore from Iowa, who is their number one big this year. She was a backup last year to Monica Sonano. And Stolke, we talked about this with Christy Winters-Scott earlier, she has the ability to completely change this game in a way that LSU can't counter. LSU is going to rely on their bigs, Anissa Morrow and Angel Reese, to be forces in all facets. And one thing with Angel is she is very susceptible to foul trouble. And I think testing, like she's had some issues in some games this year on a conditioning front, like specifically against South Carolina, where she gets a little tired. And then we know what happens as a basketball player when you get tired. Your feet don't work as well. You get a little lazy, you reach, you commit fouls. And Hannah Stolke's job tonight is basically to see if she can run Angel Reese off the floor. And I mean that in a very literal sense. Every single time a shot goes up for and it's a balance, because when LSU shoots, you have to make sure that you keep Reese and Morrow off the offensive glass. But I kind of want to say, like, in a lot of situations, let's let Stolke leak out or just trust that she's going to be faster. As soon as Iowa grabs the rebound, like, she has got to take off for a rim run and see if she can beat Angel Reese down the floor, and at the very least make Angel Reese chase her. And maybe Morrow winds up with that assignment and they take that off of Angel's plate. But I do think that's a factor tonight, Ant, of can you steal 6, 8, 10 points in transition and maybe a couple of fouls of Reese trying to chase Stolke down and just tire her out. Because if Angel can be her, LSU's got a great chance. And I say this, I want to be very clear here. Iowa's the better team. Even though LSU won last year, like LSU's a 3 seed, Iowa's a 1 seed. LSU has had their ups and downs this year. Iowa has dropped a couple of games, but largely has been a top 2 to 5 team in the country all year and was more than deserving of the number 1 seed that they carry into this game. So it is, despite the results of the last matchup, an upset if LSU wins. But they obviously, with all the talent they have, and Flau'jae Johnson playing better than she ever has in the last game, like, they have a great chance. But if Angel's not one of, if not the best player on the floor tonight, I think that dramatically shrinks. And I think Hannah Stolke is the piece that can make that a reality.
To be honest, I don't even think Angel is the X factor in tonight's game. I think she's going to play a huge role, of course. She's the SEC Player of the Year, and she's definitely been a huge leader for them. But I think Flau'jae Johnson, I think her being more aggressive on the offensive end of the ball is going to be huge for them. The last 2 games that she's played, she's been spectacular, attacking the rim, and she's done it at an efficient rate. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, I think she's going to be one guarding Caitlin Clark, so I think that also might wear on her on the offensive side of the ball, because if you're expending so much energy on the defensive side of the ball with Caitlin Clark, it might affect your offensive game. So I'm really looking at Flau'jae and how she's going to impact this game. I think Angel Reese, she's definitely going to have to be able to stay out of foul trouble. But if she does that and Stolke ends up getting in foul trouble, I think that's where Iowa could really be in some huge trouble, because Morrow, she's relentless on the offensive board.
Great offensive player.
So I think if Stolke manages, just staying out of foul trouble, and I hope the refs, let them play. Christy Winters-Scott alluded to it a little bit. If they let them play, I think we can see like a really good game. But if they set the precedent early where they're calling ticky-tack fouls, I think that's going to favor LSU a little bit more, just because they have more depth down low than an Iowa team.
I also, that cuts two ways, though, because I do think that they're going to want to be physical with Clark.
Yes.
Like, which is, I think something people need to understand about Caitlin Clark is she's way bigger than you think she is.
She's a
and she is a dog. Like that said, if you can get hands on her, she is going to struggle more than if she's allowed to move freely. That's any basketball player. But like, I don't think people realize like Caitlin's built. Like, that's not how it's been the entire time in her career. But like, she is built, and she has shown the ability in her senior year to finish through contact at the rim. I think the other element that is huge tonight is the three-point shooting of Iowa for players not named Caitlin Clark.
Mm-hmm.
Caitlin, obviously, if she goes bananas, if she has a 9 for 12 three-point shooting night, like LSU's in trouble because that's math. That's how that math be mathing. She's going to have 40 and 12 assists, and what are you going to do? You lose, you shake her hand, and Caitlin's off to the Final Four. But if Gabby Marshall and Kate Martin and Falter and all those players hit threes, like that's a long night for LSU, and Caitlin's going to have 15 assists. If they don't, then it's going to look a lot more like the West Virginia game. A reminder, last year in the national championship game, they just kind of let her do her thing and then made sure that no one else could. In the championship game last year, she was 9 of 22 from the field, 8 of 19 from three-point range. But she only had 8 assists. And I say only because she's capable of getting 12, 15 assists if she's able to drive and kick and get shots to players like Marshall and Martin, and they're knocking them down. So I think it's a really, really critical element tonight. Obviously, making shots, key to basketball. Got it. Great analysis, Hoffman. But that is so important to space LSU out and stress them defensively, because I think the other thing is, like, she took 22 shots last year in the national title game. 19 were threes. If you're getting the drive and kick game, that opens up the drive and finish game because the defense can't collapse on you. And I think that's another thing for Clark tonight. Get to the free throw line, get in attack mode, see if you can pick up some fouls on LSU's bigs, because then it comes down to, like, can Haley Van Lith have a throwback game? And if I'm Iowa and that's how LSU beats me, I'm like, okay, good job, Haley. But that's not who Haley Van Lith has been this year, and that's not how LSU wants to play. Obviously, Flau'jae Johnson could have a big game too, but like, they don't have the scoring. I know they score 89 a game, but if they're up and running, Iowa is, and they're hitting those shots from the outside, and they can then get a couple of players from LSU in foul trouble, LSU doesn't have the depth to keep up. So I think those are just some of the keys tonight. It's going to be an incredible, incredible game. I think pace is super important. Even though LSU can play fast and certainly can score, like if this is a track meet, I think that favors Iowa. Caitlin out in the open floor versus a grind. If they have to find shots and grind it out, how does that go? I think that's another interesting part tonight, and that's where Flau'jae has such a big impact, because I think she's good in that pick and roll in the half court, and then that also makes Caitlin defend more, because that's the other part of this is what does Iowa do defensively? Do they zone it up? Do they try to play man? How do they try to hide Caitlin? Both because she's not an elite defender, but also she's actually great at roaming and picking off passes and things. So I don't know. God, there's just so much to talk about with this game.
Too much. Too much to talk about. But I definitely think the three-point shooting by Iowa, I think that's going to play a pivotal role, because, again, LSU, they don't have a lot of three-point shooters. They rely heavily on getting to the free throw line, slowing the game down, playing inside out, and things of that nature. So if Iowa's hitting some threes early on, it could definitely be a little scary for LSU, who doesn't necessarily have the shooting fire to retaliate.
Yeah, do they have the three-point shooting to keep up? I don't think so, especially if Iowa's hitting. But Iowa's had some nasty cold streaks. Last thing. Actually, let's do this next. We used to do this on the Take Command pregame show. This is how we would end the Take Command pregame show during the fall. Logan and I, and then Denton would join us to do this. Is we would say, if this, then the Commanders win, and we pick a stat. Be like, if Jahan Dotson has 9 targets, then the Commanders are going to win. I've got a stat that I'm going to throw at you along that next. We'll pick both games, not just the Iowa-LSU game, but the UConn-USC game. That is all next to wrap up before we give way to the Westwood One pregame show here on the Team 980. wrap it up here on the Hoffman Show. We are live at the Green Turtle today, as we are with you, of course, on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. About 15 minutes away from pregame coverage of LSU and Iowa NCAA March Madness, the women's NCAA basketball tournament here on the Team 980. Anthony, we're going to go, I'm going to pull a trick from the old Take Command pregame show that we did last season. We finished the show by giving a stat and said, if this stat is true, that is how we think, or this is how we think the game will go. Do you have yours ready, or you want me to hit you with mine first?
You can give me yours first.
Okay. So I think if Kate Martin has 12 or more rebounds, then Iowa wins the game. She is so important for them as a rebounder. And obviously, like, Caitlin's big coming down as a guard. Stolke's massively important as their big. But LSU's bigs could dominate this game on the glass, and offensive rebounds could be a massive, massive part of this. And so if Kate Martin has 12 or more rebounds, that means she's done a good job of keeping LSU's bigs off the offensive glass. So I think, like, obviously, look, like Gabby Marshall's got 5 threes. Like, yeah, cool. Honestly, if Gabby Marshall has 3 or 4 threes, Kate Martin has 3 or 4 threes. Like, I feel pretty good about Iowa's chances. But to me, when we talk about, like, a stat that is indicative of game flow, a stat that is indicative of one team's ability to dominate an advantage or to not, I think Kate Martin's rebounding tonight is super duper essential for Iowa to be able to win.
All right, here's my stat.
All right. How does Anthony do on his maiden voyage in stats that win games?
I feel like if Haley Van Lith has 12 points.
12?
12.
That feels
12
low.
it doesn't sound like a lot, but she has struggled badly in this tournament.
Yeah.
What did she have? She had 7 against UCLA. I think she had 6 the game before. Like, she hasn't. Maybe I can up their scoring, maybe to like 15 points or something along those lines. I think that'll position LSU to be in a far better position where they were, just because Angel Reese, Flajay Johnson, they're going to need some additional scoring, especially with a team like Iowa who can, like, really score in spurts. So I think if Haley Van Lith is putting up some points, getting some buckets, impacting the game, I think it could bode well for LSU.
Yeah, no, I think she might have to. And if I'm Iowa, I am trying to make that the case. Like, I almost am like, dang, if Haley Van Lith has 3 points, that means LSU might have won, because that means that she didn't have to take a whole bunch of shots. Because if I'm Iowa, I am zoning this thing up. I'm doubling like crazy on Morrow, and, I got to make sure my rotations are good, but on Morrow and Reese, I'm trying to get the ball out of their hands, and I'm trying to make LSU's guards beat me. And I'm like, if we want to go guard for guard, I take my guard in Caitlin Clark versus your guards as good as Flaugier and Haley Van Lith are capable of being. Like, that is more of Iowa's style and pace versus obviously LSU wants to play through their bigs and Reese and Morrow. So I think that's key tonight. All right, any thoughts before we get to real things, our segment that we do daily to wrap up the show? Any thoughts or a prediction? Or actually, no, let's just go predictions. Let's go prediction Iowa LSU. Who you got?
I have LSU.
Ooh.
I have LSU winning today's game by 7. I think last year they won by like 14 or something like that.
Yeah, it was not close by the end. All right, Anthony. Anthony's got LSU. I've got Iowa. I think Clark has stepped up in every major moment this year, from game winners to just like, I don't need a game winner because I've put you away, but 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. They have just answered the bell. I think that they are on a mission. I picked them to win the whole thing, so this actually is not that surprising. But I think that Iowa also has the balance and the pieces to make life a little more difficult than they could last year for this LSU team. Going to be a tough game. LSU's fully capable. This is not me saying like LSU's bad or anything like that. But I'm taking Iowa tonight. Then you got Juju Watkins and USC versus Paige Bueckers and Connecticut. That game follows Iowa-LSU here on the Team 980. Who you got in that one?
That one I was still struggling. I'm not going to lie. I think I'm going to go with I'm going to go with USC. I think they got a little bit more star power to help Juju. I think Paige has definitely carried UConn for majority of the season, just because they've dealt with so many injuries, so she's had to. But I think USC, I think they find a way to get it done.
This won't be true for much longer, but Paige Bueckers is the best player in this game. Now, by next year, Juju Watkins is probably going to be better than Paige Bueckers. Maybe, I don't know, Paige is still going to be playing college basketball. She's coming back to UConn. Yep. And I think the third best player in this game is Aaliyah Edwards. That said, it gets real thin for UConn after that. I'm going to go with USC. I think they have more depth, and I think unlike UConn's earlier opponents in this tournament, USC's depth is enough to actually push UConn's depth. And things got real dicey for UConn down the stretch in that last game. And I just wonder the cumulative effect. Obviously, they just played 2 nights ago. Tired, better opponent, deeper opponent. If I'm USC, I am trying to run them up and down the floor and see if I can get into their legs in the fourth quarter. I'll take USC to knock off UConn and send Aaliyah Edwards off to the WNBA and maybe right here to the Mystics. Just saying. All right. One more thing on the Iowa-LSU game is where we start. This is how we end the show every day. It is a segment we like to call Real Things Real People Said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, Anthony, obviously so much talk, and we've kind of avoided the talk because I think a lot of it is silly, but Angel Reese, I thought this was great from her, the Baltimore native, talking about the relationship between her and Caitlin Clark, which is not as frosty as I think a lot of people make it out to be.
Me and Caitlin Clark don't hate each other. Like, I want everybody to understand that it's just a super competitive game, and like, I would just wish people realize that. Like, once I get between those lines, it's no friends. I have plenty of friends on the court that I talk to outside of the game, but like, when I get between those lines, like, we're not friends. We're not buddies. I'm going to talk trash to you. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get in your head the whole entire game. But after the game, we can kick it. Like, I don't think people really realize that, and that's fine. I'll take the villain role. I'll take the hit for it. But I know we're going women's basketball, and if this is the way we're going to do it, then this is the way we're going to do it. You like it or you don't.
I mean, I do think that sports are often made by the heroes, the villains, the storylines, who's the good guy, the bad guy, or the good girl, the bad girl in this case. And, Angel has certainly leaned into that, but it is very normal. Like, I think, Anthony, like, if we played one-on-one, I would trash talk you as my friend more than I would someone that I didn't know. I do think Angel can be pretty intense in terms of, like, she'll do it right in your face, and when emotions are running high, that can obviously squirrel over. She's also had some plays this year. Think about the South Carolina game. Like, you crossed a couple lines on the dirty play side of it, but this part of it, like, this is awesome. This is fun. This is sports, and I can't wait to see these two teams go at it tonight.
Yeah, and I think she was also right in terms of, like, growing the game.
100% it's growing the game.
I think a lot of people have been, making the comparison of Angel and Caitlin to, like, Magic and Bird, like that kind of feeling, when Michigan State was going up against Indiana State. And I love it because guess what? That's something that was memorable, and I think everybody's going to remember these kinds of moments between these two for, like, years and, decades to come, to be honest.
Without a doubt. All right, what else do we got? I know we have Wade Phillips, and then what was the other one that we had?
We got Sue Bird.
This was great. Let's do this first. From the Together show that Sue Bird's media company, she had Aaliyah Edwards, Paige Bueckers, and Nneka Ogwumike on, all of whom have made quite a bit of money in their basketball careers, young and old. So Sue asked the classic interview question.
I've been asked this a million times. It's kind of cheeky, but here we go. All of us on this call, I'm just going to say it. We got bank accounts, and they're pretty big. That's one misconception. But we all got money on this call. That's why we're here. What was one of your first big purchases?
I bought myself a car. I bought, like, really expensive, I want to say at the time it was, like, Brazilian virgin hair.
Ooh, so you had, like, a bust down everything.
I wouldn't say that it was bust down, but it was on my head. And,
I went to Louis Vuitton. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I saw a nice little over-the-shoulder bag. My favorite color is purple, so there was a purple Louis Vuitton bucket hat, so I got both of those.
Anthony, I feel like you would buy a Louis Vuitton bucket hat.
I wouldn't get the bucket hat. I would just get a fitted hat. That's what I would get. I haven't gotten one yet, but
Well, it's because you haven't made your basketball money yet.
See, look, that's what I'm waiting on.
Yeah, we're just waiting on. What was your first big purchase? I'm waiting for my first big paycheck. I work in radio. Hey-oh, but last but not least, the XFL back, or no, sorry, not the XFL, the UFL, the United Football League, the USFL and the XFL merged. That was back this weekend. And there was a play where there was a fake punt against the DC Defenders, or fake field goal. The punter was lined up. Brad Wing, he used to play at LSU. I think he might be Australian. Anyway, he threw the ball to his center, who was lined up as an eligible receiver. It was a touchdown. And the head coach above it all was none other than Wade Phillips.
I'd like to take credit and say, hey, it's just the way we planned it. But, if you throw it to your center on a pass play, it really wasn't the first option. So, but our punter did a great job. The guy we thought was going to be open with our tight end kind of running across the field, and they actually had two guys on him. And then our second choice was the kicker, who we really don't want to throw it to anyway, but he was covered, and nobody covered our center who had checked. Now, we did the right job. We checked in. He checked in the ball game. He was an eligible receiver, and he was really our third option that was wide open. And so, so Brad Wing did a great job of. I told him, I said, I've never had a punter go to the third read.
You love to see it. The punter getting to the third read. Unless, of course, you're a DC Defenders fan. So sorry to the Defenders for bringing that up. All right, that is our show. Iowa-LSU is next here on the team, 980.